Welcome, everyone. Tonight is the last of a four-part series on the worlds of Tohu and Tikkun and Shvirat Hakeilim, the worlds of chaos and rectification and the breaking of the vessels. Since we're past Tisha B'Av, the whole incentive for doing this series was during the 3 weeks. It is all about breaking. It is all about Shvirat Hakeilim, the breaking of all the breaking in the world. And now that we're past Tisha B'Av, so the subject tonight is based on a very well-known, at least within the Chabad movement. In 1991, the Lubavitcher Rabbi, on the 28th of Nisan, Koach Nisan, there was a Farbrengen, and during the Farbrengen, he pretty much shocked everyone in attendance, where he announced that I've done everything I can to bring Mashiach, and now it's in your hands. In a sense, I can't do any more, but I'm empowering you because you're the ones who are going to have to do it. And if you can imagine, that sent shockwaves through the Lubavitch community. It wasn't that much longer after that the Rabbi had his stroke. And it took a couple of years until he actually passed away in 1994. So this was 1991. But during that talk, so he said that one of the, call it advices, or one of the ways that will bring Mashiach is orot de Tohu, the Hakeilim de Tikkun. That the lights of the world of Tohu will now find rectified vessels to dwell in. He said that is, we'll call it the formula. That's the magic pill that will bring Mashiach. And we've been talking for a couple of weeks now about the world of Tohu, the world of Tikkun. Truthfully, we just scratched the surface. But tonight, what we're going to do is Rabbi Ginsburg took this idea in his Farbrengen. The Rabbi didn't really explain how to do that. He was just saying what the world needs in order to bring Mashiach is these great lights of Tohu, even though we call it the world of chaos. It's called that because the vessels broke. The light was awesome. The light was pure. The light was tremendous. And so the Rabbi was saying, we need those lights, but we need vessels that can hold them and won't shatter. And when we can integrate these great lights of the world of Tohu into rectified vessels, that is what will bring Mashiach. So Rav Ginsburg took this idea and he developed it through his usual making a paradigm of the Shvirat. And what we're going to do tonight, I'm sticking really very, very closely to this Torah that Rav Ginsburg gave over. Every once in a while, my ideas will pop in there. But this is basically, there's a small booklet that came out explaining this. And I'll say, B'li Neder, in the WhatsApp on Thursday, we will post the Hebrew. Now, I know everyone can't handle the Hebrew, but I do not have the whole translation. But for those who do, you'll be able to, it will be a review of what we're learning tonight. So of course, we don't have all night. So I'm going to go through this paradigm and just try to spend just a few minutes on each one of the Shvirot. And the idea that Rav Ginsburg gives as to what exactly is this formula of putting the lights of Tohu in the vessels of Tikkun. We're going to begin at the highest Shvira of Keter. But before we do it, there are three basic ideas that I want everyone to follow through all of these Shvirot, is that we're going to see that the lights of Tohu and the vessels of Tikkun, they're usually going to be opposites. Two opposite either attitudes, two opposite ways of acting, two opposite ways of thinking. And really what the Rabbi was saying is this is the secret of bringing Mashiach, is the ability to bridge opposites, to bring paradoxes to the level where they are unified. They're not two opposite ideas that cannot dwell with each other. So this is very, very important to remember as we go through this, because you'll notice. And as we go through this, when we begin in Keter, it will be somewhat philosophical, intellectual. But as we move down the Shvirot, it becomes more and more practical. And the other thing to look for is the idea that Rav Ginsburg gives over, that in all of these cases, the lights of Tohu can be compared to what's called the run, and the vessels of Tikkun, of rectification, is the return, run and return. This is a concept that we have discussed in different contexts many, many times. The run of the soul and the return of the soul. And we're going to see how that plays out in really 11 different ways. Here, Rav Ginsburg doesn't do the three heads of Keter. He deals with Keter altogether and with Dat. So there are going to be 11 different levels here. So we'll start with Keter. And again, this is like in the highest plane. This is a Torah from within Chabad, and that has been developed. It comes from Isaac of Homel, where he gave this idea of God is all, and all is God. Now it's very subtle what the difference is. But Rav Ginsburg says all is God is represented by the verse in the Torah that says, Ein od milvado. There is nothing other than him. Ein od milvado. There's nothing else other than God. So as it were, from God's perspective, this is the lights, these phenomenal lights, because we're going from above to below. As it were, from God's perspective, all is God. From our perspective, I'll say it again. God is all. From our perspective, it's a similar verse. Ein od. There is nothing else. These are two different verses in the Torah. One says, Ein od milvado. There's nothing other than God. And the other one says, there's nothing else. So from the lower perspective, our perspective, we are aware that there's a world. We're aware that there is a very physical world. But our goal, our task, is to recognize that it is all from God. Even though it appears like there's mineral, there's vegetable, there's animal, and there's human, and there's plurality and their opposites all over the place. But to come to realize that all is God. So this is what Rav Ginsburg explains. And there's a very amazing teaching here, is along with the run and return, we can see it from two different perspectives. Usually, we're relating to it from a human perspective. So from a human perspective, the soul longs to run to God, longs to run to its source in the upper worlds, the root of the soul. So the soul runs, but ultimately it must return. That God wants us in this world. But from God's perspective, God runs into the world, but if God would not withdraw, then the whole world would be shattered. The whole world would blink out. So God runs into the world and then returns in order to give us a sense of independence. So if you follow this, we're running up, as it were, and coming down, and God is running down and going back up. And that is the subtle difference between God is all. These are the lights of Tohu. God is all. And the vessels, though, because we're in this world and we're physical, is to recognize that all is God. Now we'll go to Chokhmah, wisdom. And here, wisdom many times is thought of as intellectual prowess. Someone's smart, someone's wise. But there's a higher level, and we're told that from Keter to Chokhmah, there's like a bridge. And a true, what we'll call it, a Talmid Chacham, a truly wise Torah scholar, is someone who's drawing from what's called Mocha Stima, the hidden brain in Keter. So in other words, it's not just knowing facts and being smart. It has to do with being able to draw down these lights of Tohu into the intellect. So that's the lights of Torah drawing from what's called the hidden brain, which is the inspiration for true Torah wisdom and normative intellect. Now, Rav Ginsburg gives an example. In the Gemara, they explain that there's two different ways to approach Torah learning. One is called Oker Harim, uprooting mountains, and the other one is called Sinai, Mount Sinai. What does this represent? So this is what in yeshiva language is called iyun and pekiut. Iyun is the ability, and this is done in many yeshivot, where they will sit on a page of Gemara for weeks and even months at a time. And they will investigate it and delve into it from every angle, and they'll read 100 different commentaries, all on one page, until they grasp the incredible depths. Another way of learning is, Pekias is having a broad knowledge of the entire Torah. The Chumash, the Tanakh, the Midrash, the Mishnah, the Gemara, Kabbalah, Chassidut, philosophy, the whole thing. They're both valuable, but the ability to delve into such depths, these are the lights of Tohu. This is the ability to go so deep. And Pakias is the way to go so wide. Now here again, the goal of all of this is to take the lights of Tohu in Hakeilim of Tikkun. So there's no right or wrong way of learning here. The idea is to be able to do both, is to be able to scan the full breadth, but not superficially, to be able to do it on a deep level as well. Like I said, because of time constraints, we can only spend a short time on each one of these. The next one is Bina, understanding. And this is also a paradigm of ratso v'shov, running and returning. So Rav Ginsburg says the lights of Tohu is what's called klot hanefesh, which means the soul expiring in its love for God. And I'm sure all of us have experienced this at different times, where in either prayer or meditation or on one of the holidays or in nature, our soul is just bursting with the desire to unite with God. So these are the lights of Tohu. This ability to allow the soul to run almost infinitely. But there's also the idea is the soul can't just leave this world. This is the whole story of Nadav and Avihu. Nadav and Avihu, if you remember, on the day that the Mishkan is inaugurated, they brought a fire with the incense that they were not commanded. And the Torah says that their souls were consumed. According to the Midrash, their bodies weren't touched. And the whole thing is they had such klot hanefesh, they wanted so much to be close to God, that their souls quite literally left them. So that's the lights of Tohu, but it needs to be in vessels of rectification. And so that's what's called Bal Korcha Atachai. God put us into this world because he wants us in the world. And as wonderful as it is to want to return to God, to return to our heavenly abode, that happens after 120 years. That's not meant until then. And this is also the same story of the Arba Shenichnasu LaPardes, the four that went into the Pardes. And it says only Rabbi Akiva went in peace and came out in peace. And Rav Ginsburg explains is because the others, they wanted to run. They reached this, they had worked for years to reach this level of mystical meditation. And so when they got to the pinnacle, their souls ran. And one of them died. His soul left him. One of them lost his sense of sanity. One of them became a heretic. And it says only Rabbi Akiva went in peace and came out in peace. Because he knew when he was running that the point was he had to return. So that's the idea of in Bina, this ability. It's a wonderful thing to let your soul run. But it has to then, that experience has to be integrated into vessels that can then hold it. This happens, I just have to mention, it's just, I was just heartbroken that it's something like something between 200 and 300 people a day are overdosing from fentanyl in America now, dying. Their souls are running. They're running, and there's no vessel of rectification. They're just, and most of the time they don't even realize it. They don't understand how dangerous this drug is, how powerful it is. But in a certain level, it's like if they're taking it already, they're running. They're running. So this is the idea that, no, we need to stay in this world. That's where God wants us. And yet, this ability to allow the soul to experience these high moments is very important, is very crucial. Next is dat, knowledge. So this is a very, very interesting one. There's an expression that says, ilu yedativ hayitiv. If I would know him, meaning God, I would be him. So that expresses that God is beyond our ability to really know God in the ultimate sense. We certainly try to understand as much about God and the world and his creation that we can. But the expression is, if I knew him, I would be him. So that is, I'm going in the opposite direction. This is, in a sense, the vessels of Tikkun, because we have to be humble enough to understand that we're not God. We have a godly soul, and we're a part of God. But like the expression says, if I could truly know him, I would be him. But then there's the opposite. And this is Yedativ Hayitiv. And this, Rav Ginsburg brings down that the Rabbi Rashab, who was the fifth in the line of Chabad rabbis, so he said once, when I go into a room by myself and I'm studying the book from the Alter Rebbe, Torah Or, I can get to the level of Yedativ Hayitiv. I know him and I can be him. Now, he didn't mean it in the ultimate sense, but what he did mean is, since the soul is a chelak Elokah mima'al mamash, an actual part of God above, there are those moments of clarity. There are moments of just knowing. And those are the lights of Tohu. So on a certain level, again, dat, if you remember, means to be totally unified with the object of knowing. That's what knowledge means in the word dat. Like we say, Adam yada et chava ishto, and Adam knew his wife. Well, he knew her intimately, and they became unified, body and soul. So the Rabbi Rashab was saying, because we have a divine soul, there are moments of this unity that we can reach. And that is the unity of the lights of Tohu in the vessels of rectification. Now we go to Chesed. And here, it's what's called Rav Chesed. The lights of Tohu is the feeling of wanting to give everything. Many times parents want to give everything to their children. A spouse wants to give everything to their beloved. We want to do charity. We want to do loving kindness. So that's the lights of Tohu. We want to give it all. We want to be like God. Chesed kel kol hayom. That the chesed of God is the whole day, all the time. But that's not how the world works. That's not how God works. There are limits. I remember once Rav Shlomo was teaching this idea, and he said, how does it sound to you if a beggar comes to the door and the wife answers the door and the beggar says, oh, please, please help me out. And she takes off her wedding ring and she gives it to the beggar. Rav Shlomo said, does that sound good to you? No, there are limits. And that's just an example. There's limits to everything. And actually there's many halachas about how to give, when to give, to whom to give, what order to give, priorities. So this is the example in Chesed of it's wonderful to want to give to everyone as much as you can. But there's limits, even with parents and children. Sometimes when parents want to give everything to their children, they end up smothering them. And it's coming from a good place. But there's limits to everything. So the limits are the vessels of rectification. To be able to take the feeling and the attitude of wanting to help everyone and do good. Or let's say someone who's involved with an organization and is just wants so much for it to succeed, or a movement, and wants so much for it to succeed, the person ends up not paying attention to his wife and his children. So there's limits to everything. So that's chesed. Gevura, so Rav Ginsburg says here, what we can learn is what's called Teva Rishon and Teva Sheni. Our first nature and our second nature. What does this mean? The first nature is the personality traits that we're born with, the way that we develop from a young child, what we lean towards, what we're attracted to in a natural, intuitive way. Teva Sheni, now that Teva Rishon is wonderful. That's who we are. But we all know that who we are needs a little bit of polishing, needs a little bit of fixing. That's what's called Teva Sheni, our second nature. Our second nature is when we can take our Teva Rishon and spruce it up a bit, improve it, direct it, rectify it. So again, here is all of these are in a sense opposites, and we're trying to unify him. So here we don't want to squash the Teva Rishon, but we do want to fix it. We do want to make it better. And that's Teva Sheni. What's interesting is the expression Teva Sheni equals 441, which equals the word emet. So if we would ask, well, who is the true person? Who is the real person? The Teva Rishon or the Teva Sheni? So we would answer it's really the Teva Sheni, because it's taking the best of the Teva Rishon and the better and improved product. That's the true person. So here the Teva Rishon is the lights of Tohu, because we know that we all have a bit of chaotic emotions. And we need to stabilize in Tevasheni. The next is Tiferet. And this is a very, very important one. And this is based around the idea of Simcha Shel Mitzvah. What do we mean by this? So Rav Ginsburg says the lights of Tohu is what's called Simcha Poretzet Geder. Joy breaks through all barriers. So we know that there's this important idea called Simcha Shel Mitzvah. In fact, the Ari was asked, on what merit did you bring down such incredible teachings? On what merit did Eliyahu Navi come to you and reveal these secrets that had never been revealed before? And the Ari answered, I tried to have Simcha Shel Mitzvah in everything I did. I tried to have this incredible joy in everything that I did. That's how he answered them. So here, this idea that joy breaks through all barriers. So again, these are emotions or feelings or experiences we've all had at precious moments. We've all had those moments of intense joy, of real, sincere, just beyond infinite type of joy. But then we have a paradox. And the paradox is that when you look at any mitzvah, it is so defined. It is so, there's so many borders, there's so many laws and rules and fences around every single mitzvah. So how do you like bridge this? How do you take the lights of Tohu, this incredible joy with every mitzvah, and yet not only observe all of the details of the mitzvah, but stay within the boundaries? So it's not, that's the whole idea. It doesn't have to be opposites, and it doesn't have to be a paradox. And there's a great secret here, that the word Geder equals 207 equals Ein Sof. So listen to this paradox. Within the letter of the law is the spirit of the law. Within the details and the exact fulfillment of a mitzvah in the like correct halachic way, which seems that it's so narrow, it's so bound in, that opens the gate to infinite joy. And the example that we'll use here is Shabbat. Shabbat has so many laws of mostly what we can't do. And that's why so many people who unfortunately have never experienced the true joy of Shabbat and the peace of Shabbat, they look at Shabbat and it's like, how can you do this? You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. What's there left to do? That's how people look at it from the outside. But those people who experience it from the inside know it's because we don't do all of these things that we can have an experience of an infinite peace, infinite joy and light. So that was Tiferet. So that's the idea of taking the what we'll call the fences around the Torah, and they actually lead us into infinite lights of Tohu. The next is Netzach. Netzach means victory or eternity. And Rav Ginsburg connects this to time. Netzach means eternal. So here we have this idea of being above time within time. Again, as I said in the beginning, these are all somewhat paradoxical. So many times the soul wants to run to these to have infinite moments of experience. But then the challenge becomes like Rabbi Akiva. How do you take that moment and then integrate it into our normative lives? So this is what's called Lamala Min Hazman, being above time, within time at the same time. Now this leads to one of the most important teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. And I know personally this teaching, I live with it every day because it's a great challenge, but it's the most important thing about living a sane life. And that's what the Baal Shem Tov calls Zrizut b'mitinut. Zrizut means alacrity, knowing how to move fast, how to make quick decisions, how to be decisive, how to apply oneself, how to focus oneself. And b'mitinut comes from the word to wait. In other words, to do that in a calm, measured, peaceful way. Because we know many times when we have situations where we have to make quick decisions, we have to apply ourselves. We have 10 minutes to do this. We have a half an hour to do that. We have a day to do this. We tend to get stressed out. We tend to get everything gets very hectic. So the Baal Shem Tov said, this is the lights of Tohu in the vessels of Tikkun. In other words, how to act fast with alacrity, get things done, be efficient, make the best of our time in a calm, measured manner. So since I learned this, I think about this every day. I try to check myself. When I see myself like getting stressed out, it's like, okay, what did the Baal Shem Tov say? Zrizut b'mitinut. This is like tremendous advice for all of us. And this is the example of Orot to Tohu, Hakeilim to Tikkun. Again, they seem like opposites. How can you move fast and be calm? Well, you can. You actually can. It's a challenge, believe me. It's a real challenge. But when you can master it even a few times a day, it is so worth it. It is so worth it. The next is Hod. Hod means thanksgiving, appreciation, confession, praise, all these different things. And it's Netzach and Hod always go together. One is called the right leg, Netzach, Hod is the left leg. So here we had Zrizut b'mitinut. Here Rav Ginsburg calls it Hefkarut b'zihirut. And here he explains the part of the soul that wants to act b'mesirut nefesh. B'mesirut nefesh, it's very similar to the netzach. It's giving your all, including at times your entire life for God, for what's called Kiddush Hashem, for other people. This happens in the army all the time, where people sacrifice their lives to save other lives. So the run of the soul is when it's ready, whether in life or even in death, to give your your all, even if it means giving up your life or what's good for you. Everyone knows that we have times where we're called upon to do things that we really don't want to do. It's not pleasurable, but we know it's the right thing to do in the moment. And so we have what's called Mesirut Nefesh. We give over our soul in order to do what we think is right or is called for. At the same time, we have a mitzvah in the Torah, which is called V'nishmartem ma'od b'nafshotechem. Guard your soul very much. So here you can hear the difference. On one hand, the soul is ready to run because of these great lights and give its all, including one's life. But we also have a mitzvah, again, to stay in this world, to guard our soul. And this expression, v'nishmartem ma'od b'nafshotechem, this is used in Jewish tradition, the idea of living a healthy, safe life. Because if, like, let's say extreme sports, so halakhically, it's really a big problem. Extreme sports is a big problem because you're not guarding your soul. If you ever watch someone, they climb these straight, like faces of mountains with no ropes, up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of feet, if not more, clinging with their fingernails to the rocks, knowing just one wrong move, that's it. They're out of this world. So that's a problem with guarding your soul very much. And many rabbis will quote this about smoking, that there's so much evidence now about the dangers of smoking. It's a whole question if halakhically one can smoke. Anyways, these are the ideas that on one hand we could be, and in certain circumstances, it's good to give our all, to go beyond ourselves. On the other hand, we have to guard our souls very much. Those are the vessels of Tikkun. Next is Yesod. Yesod is foundation. And here, if you remember in the Shvirat, so all of the Shvirat are channeled like a funnel through Yesod. Right here is Yesod. All the other ones flow in to Yesod and then down to Malchut. So here, Rav Ginsburg explains, so what are the lights of Tohu in the vessels of Tikkun in relationship to Yesod? So here he says what is called Seder and Seder. Seder means order, priorities. Of course, we know Seder night, the Seder of Pesach. Here we have 15 very defined steps that lead us through the experience of remembering coming out of Egypt. It's very misudar. And yet, there is no night that is more Seder than Seder night. Everything we're doing is different than we do any other time. Manishtana halayla zeh. Everything is different. So this is a total paradox. But here, Seder means the ability to be spontaneous, the ability to think out of the box, to act on our intuition, to let our guts lead the way. And then Seder is having priorities, setting an order, being like I said, organized. So these don't have to be contradictions. But we have to learn how to take these, being spontaneous is really connecting to really high levels of soul and spirituality. And it looks like writing lists and having a Seder and being organized is so boring, but these are the vessels of Tikkun. We need both. We have to have both. So this is what's called in-Welt v'ois-Welt, in this world and out of this world, which could apply to a number of these different ideas here. The ability to be able to go beyond this world, beyond time, beyond space, beyond our usual normative reactions to things. But at the same time, to have vessels of rectification that can do something with it. There's a beautiful idea is in the negotiations between Moshe and Pharaoh. Like for a lot of the plagues, Pharaoh calls Moshe and says, okay, I'll let your men go. And then I'll let your men and your children go. Or I'll let your men go with the animals. And so it goes back and forth. But one time, Pharaoh says, I'll let this part go. And Moshe says, no, we're going with everything because we don't know what we need to serve God until we get there. And this is a big thing in Chassidut, is Rav Ginsburg explained, he said there were certain rabbis or certain people, if you asked them, what are you doing tomorrow? They'd say, I have no idea what I'm doing tomorrow. How can I know what I'm doing tomorrow? It's not tomorrow. How do I know what I need to do tomorrow until it's tomorrow? And he said other people, other rabbis knew exactly what they're doing months and even years in advance. They have it all planned out exactly how their life is going to go. Is one right and one wrong? No. These are taking this ability to be open to something new. That's what Moshe said. We don't know what we need to serve God until we get there. But it's Moshe who brings down the Torah from Sinai, which is telling us what to do every day, how to live a Jewish life. So that's Yesod. The last is Malchut. And the two phrases that Rav Ginsburg brings, the one for the lights of Tohu is Ana Emloch. I will rule. Now remember, Malchut means kingship, leadership, the sovereign. So we're told that this expression comes from the son of David HaMelech, who wanted to become king while David was still king. And he said, Ana Emloch, I will rule. And the Arizal explains that this was the problem of Shvirat Hakeilim, of the breaking of the vessels, that each of the Sfirot said, Ani Emloch, I don't need the other Sfirot, I will rule. That's why they all broke, because their vessels were too narrow. They didn't know how to interact with each other. So those are the lights of Tohu. But Rav Ginsburg says there's also a good side to Ana Emloch. And this is when a person can lead, can take all of their potential and really apply it and be a leader. That's a great thing. Ana Emloch, I will rule. But it doesn't mean I will rule with an iron fist. It doesn't mean I will rule and not take anyone's feelings in consideration. That's not what it means. So the idea of I will rule in its pure potential, these are the lights of Tohu. We could even say, I can do it. Remember the little train that said, I could? I can make it up the mountain, right? I can make it up the mountain. That's Ani Amloch. On the other hand, what are the vessels? Because that can get out of hand. People with big egos, Ani Amloch ends up with Shvirat Hakeilim, either for the person or the people they're ruling over, or both. Usually both. So the expression of the vessels of Tikkun is Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shemayim, the willingness to take upon oneself the yoke of heaven. In other words, God's kingdom. That is the Tikkun. That's why being what's called an Eved Hashem, a servant of God, the greatest servant of God was Moshe. In the Torah itself, God calls him the ultimate Eved Hashem. But who is a greater leader than Moshe? He was like the greatest leader of them all. But he accepted upon himself God's rulership. And that is true of all of us. So here again, this is the last one we're discussing. But this is what I said in the beginning, that almost all these ideas are how to put opposites together, how to put spiritual and physical together, soul and body, mind and heart, light and vessel. And this is what the Rabbi meant when he said, this is what will lead to Mashiach, because in the world of Tohu, the lights were tremendous and the vessels were few. In the world of Tikkun right now, there's so many vessels. It's such a material world. We're drowning in vessels. But where's the light? Where's the great light to fill these vessels? So that's what the Rabbi was teaching us. He was teaching us to help bring Mashiach. Each and every one of us needs to try to find ways. And almost everything we talked about today are very practical. They're really very practical. How to be beyond time and within time. How to be spontaneous but organized. How to be able to give one's all and yet guard one's soul. How to give, but know that there are limits. So almost all of them are super practical. So here we have these seemingly cosmological ideas from the Arizal about Olam Tohu and Olam Tikkun and Shvirat Hakeilim. And here in conclusion of our 4-part series, here hopefully we've seen that the world of Tohu is in this world. The world of Tikkun is in this world. Shvirat Hakeilim is in this world. This is our lives. And so hopefully we've learned some real practical goals. None of this is easy. None of this is easy. But it's important to know where we're going. How do we make tikkunim? How do we bridge the gaps in our life between mind and heart, between physical and spiritual? So I'll bless all of us that we can learn from this, that we can do it, and each one of us will do their little part, but all together, Bezrat Hashem, it will bring Mashiach.